And what is up, Gamecock Nation? Monday episode of the show. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark. We got plenty to get to, plenty to talk about: recruiting, football team stuff, kickoff parties. We got so much to talk about, I didn't even know what to call the show. But first, we got to talk about my buddy Clint Hammond. ClintHammond.com is where you can find out any of the information you need about Clint. If you're in the market for a new home, want to know how this whole mortgage thing works, maybe you're overwhelmed, just mortgage rates all over the place, up and down, very, very choppy. You want to kind of navigate what is a little bit of a difficult situation. Clint is your guy for this. The NMLS number 71597. Email address is chammond@mortgagenetwork.com. 803-422-6797. Probably the best way to get in touch with Clint. Again, as y'all know by now, unless you're just brand new on the show, you've heard us talk about Clint over and over. I promise you, you can trust him. If you're in that market, give him a shout. He'll take care of you. Chris, dude, plenty to get to. Scrimmage number 2, that typically means you're starting to just ease. You're almost into game week. Like you got one more week of kind of position battles. A lot of times coaches are in this process now trying to figure out who's a scout team guy, who's a starter, who's a rotational player, who's maybe not in the rotation on offense or defense, but is going to be a special teams guy. These battles, these storylines start to sort of take shape and kind of wind down a bit in this next, I would say, like right now, actually, this week we're going into right now after the second scrimmage. Couple of commitments for South Carolina. Xavion Hardy on Sunday. Obviously, we talked about the commitment of Xavier McLeod in our live show that wasn't really a GC live. It was just kind of right after McLeod committed. So I want to get to him a little bit today as well, just for people who haven't heard it, who just listened to the podcast side of things. And kickoff party as well, man. I know people who probably were not at the party or didn't come out or live out of state, probably tired of us talking about it by now, but they're just going to have to indulge us one more time. It was fun, man. What was your biggest takeaway from Gamecock Nation and all the folks we got to catch up with and see on Saturday at Steel Hands, presented by 1801 Venture Club?
Man, you just threw a lot out at the people right there. That was a lot. There is so much to talk about, so much to unpack. We could probably sit here for hours. Would not be very wise from a productivity standpoint. But yeah, I feel for the people who couldn't make it. Obviously, if you're across the country or you had something going on, it's tougher to make it. Try next year. There will be a year 3, unless Wes and I and the rest of the crew fall off the face of the earth. We definitely are going to do year 3. As we know, I did not make year 1. Year 2 seemed awesome. I think we wanted to do it bigger and better. I think we did it bigger and better. The best part for me, Wes, just meeting some of the folks. Craig, Gamecock Ryan, right here in the chat, as usual. Several others that, are friends of the show, so to speak. We got to meet them. So that was really cool. It was cool just kind of seeing all the fruits of the labor out there, but definitely meeting the people. And I really thought, man, having the current Gamecock athletes out there, that was a really, really cool thing for me to see. Had a few of the football players, to Carolina Joyner, Marshawn Lloyd, they were out there. Javon Gwynn, they were out there. They had to come a little bit early because they had the scrimmage that evening, so the crowd wasn't in full force. But seeing those guys, seeing the others, Gigi Jackson was incredible, just a man of the people. It was a blast, man. So I just really, really enjoyed seeing all the Gamecock fans out there having a good time. That was the best part for me.
Man, I said this on the radio, but NIL for events like this is a freaking game changer. And, NIL has gotten this negative spin from some people, from some places. And I'm not saying it's perfect in any way. I get it. Anytime you do something new, you got to tweak, you got to make changes, you got to figure out the best way for this to work for everybody, right? For all the headlines about, this guy got this much money as an inducement, allegedly to go to this school and all this stuff that you see and people talk about. What about all the just really, really legitimate ways that NIL can be used for student athletes to benefit from what is, in this case, Chris, it's quite literally they were paid for their time to come out and, basically provide a service to come out and meet and greet and have conversations with fans. And I think for them, it's obviously a game changer, but for us too, man, for businesses is an absolute game changer. So that was cool on both ends of it. If you're a Carolina fan, you should really be so proud of the way all those guys and girls just carried themselves and represented your university, class acts all the way around. Literally, Chris, every single fan that was there for the VIP part and met a South Carolina student athlete just raved about how they carried themselves. And let me just tell y'all real quick. Gigi Jackson is one of the most impressive human beings I have ever met in covering South Carolina athletics. I'm not putting this on him from an on-field, on-court, on the playing surface spot yet, but he's already a 5-star. He was the number 1 prospect in the country, so that kind of comes with the territory. But I left just after truly being around him for the first time thinking Marcus Lattimore territory, Asia Wilson territory, just complete package. And I know the expectation is that, he'd probably be at South Carolina for 1 year. That's always kind of been the expectation. So we'll see how much impact a guy could possibly make in one season. But, man, to have this kid representing your school, the Gamecocks are extremely fortunate because I was just blown away with how mature he is and how down-to-earth he is and how humble he is to be as good as he is and at the age that he is.
Yeah, and when we were putting this together, Wes, obviously Gigi was somebody we wanted to get there, and so we reached out to the folks at Garnet Trust, Jeremy Smith, who did a phenomenal job getting the players there, making sure they were comfortable, making sure everything was facilitated the right way on that front. And I do remember asking somebody, hey, when we have Gigi there, is he comfortable doing this? Is he comfortable doing that? And it was things like being in big crowds, meet and greet. You don't want to put somebody in a situation. You got to lay out the expectations, but also make sure that they're going to be comfortable. And the answer was always, oh, absolutely. He'll be good with that. He's fine. And so he gets there. And obviously, as soon as he gets there, because he's a giant, it creates a buzz. And he just goes out. I mean, nobody has to tell him anything. He just goes out there. He's shaking all the hands. He's taking all the pictures, autographs. Couldn't be more personable. So super impressed with that. Then obviously we had a chance to go back there and listen. I had to watch a lot of it later, Wes, because I was running around. But I know you were back there for his interview with Colin Taylor. That was fantastic as well. I mean, super, super impressive kid. So, yeah, definitely going places. Really, really liked the way he carried himself at the event. It was kind of the first time I got to be around him and see, how he conducted himself as well. So it was very impressive.
Yeah, and he actually was the only expectation was for him to come hang out in the little VIP tent. And you look up, man, and he literally walked around and met, I think, anybody that wanted to talk to him got to meet him because he was working the room, man. That kid's going to be, I don't want to say he's going to be a politician because that's it's an insult to Gigi, I feel like. This guy is going to be a leader, I don't even know how to say it. It was just that, it was that impressive, y'all. So, so cool. Appreciate him, man, the way he carried himself. And if you haven't seen that interview yet, it is on our YouTube page, the same spot. A lot of you are probably watching this show. So youtube.com/Gamecock Central. All in all, appreciate everybody who came out, supported, the former players that were out there, the lettermen that were out there, Preston Thorne running our player panel was awesome. Patrick Davis, the various bands that were there were great. Michael Haney, getting to see him on stage was cool. A lot of you probably remember Michael from his days at 107.5. It was great to catch up with him, man. He's doing fantastic, living out a dream. So it was cool. It was fantastic all the way around. And I'm already excited for year 3, but we're going to take a beat. We're going to take a break on that before we start planning that. Let's talk football, though. I know that's what y'all are here for. Scrimmage on Saturday. If you're a Gamecock Central subscriber, first of all, you better be. Go check it out. Just posted some notes. Chris, I had you proofread my notes, so you kind of know the stuff I'm going to be talking about anyway. It's more of like not here's what exactly happened in the scrimmage. It's kind of like here's what you need to know going into what is almost game week. Like this is kind of a summary of the scoop I've picked up the last 2 to 3 weeks, really. Some expected things along the way, I think. Maybe some surprises over the last 3 weeks. There's been some interesting developments that I think we're kind of just starting to get a feel for some of these position battles and where they're headed.
Yeah, and the next words out of my mouth were going to be exactly what Craig just said. Biggest news, no injuries. And that's the first piece of info I actually picked up, and I know you and I talked about that this weekend. They stayed healthy. They still have some guys out, as we know. Christian Beal-Smith. My understanding is that Marshawn Lloyd and Josh Vann have still been limited. Still kind of waiting to get those guys back 100%. But the good news is the expectation is they will get them back at 100%. What exact day it is, we'll see. By the way, footnote, Shane Beamer has a press conference tomorrow. So we'll have all the typical coverage of that. And our expectation is that he will give an injury report and rundown at that time. But yeah, I mean, it's been not just the scrimmage where we understand that, I heard some defensive guys were flying around, heard some more positive buzz about some guys offensively, but I know you had a lot of bigger picture notes there. And, just kind of seeing the progression of some of the wide receivers, I think has been a fascinating angle because we know Corey Rucker has, he had been limited in practice last week. You've got the Van angle. We know Josh Van's going to be playing for this football team. So that's not a huge storyline, but Amarian Brown, a guy you mentioned, Wes, is continuing to hear really good things about. This is a kid that has a lot of speed. He had his best game in the last game that South Carolina played against North Carolina, had 5 catches, started to see how his talents could be utilized in this offense. I think between him and just thinking about some of the other receivers with Spencer Rattler, kind of has your wheels turning a little bit as the season gets closer.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting kind of how these guys pull for each other, man. And it's not just a press conference. It's not just a public thing, but one of our members posting about his experience with some of the players at the kickoff party and was talking about how DeCarrion Joyner was bragging on Amarian Brown and just how Amarian has taken that next step. We saw it, like you said, the end of last year. We saw it in the spring. Was even telling that story. I think you and I shared eventually about how at camp they were doing the 40s for high school camp. And Amarian's just like, well, let me just see what I'll run today. And busts out like a sub 4.3 40-yard dash. Has everybody just sitting there like, what the? Like, you made that look easy. And,
yeah,
we see that sometimes with new players, not sub 4.3 40s. But, I mean, they come in. There are some expectations. I remember the day he committed to South Carolina. Shi Smith was the name. This is going to be the guy that's going to sort of replace what Shi Smith did. And, it never quite all came together last year. But sometimes it just takes that one full season for it all to click in. And I think Brown probably going to be one of those kids on this team, man, that's just not – I don't think he's going to lead the team in receiving, but it's just another talented weapon that can get open. And that is sort of, I think, what we all anticipated in general with this receiving core, and I would say receiving plus tight end core. But we're kind of seeing it come to fruition. Chris, I still don't know if we quite know how it's going to play out, like statistically. Who's going to be the leading receiver? Who's going to be second? Who's going to be third? So many variables for that. But I think there's probably 6 or 7 guys at receiver that if they're all healthy, you feel pretty decent about them making some level of contribution to this team.
Yeah, you do. You look at last year, and Josh Finn was the leading receiver. I think he had 43 catches. So that was his breakout season. He still didn't put up huge numbers. Like when we think of a huge season for a receiver, what do we typically think of? I don't know, 60, 70 catches, something like that. Obviously, and you made this point earlier on our show on 175 The Game, is the touches just in general were not there for the entire offense. You figure that South Carolina is going to take a leap forward in terms of being able to stay on the field longer this year, and that's going to up the opportunities for everyone. Now, how they're distributed, we don't know that yet. Will Josh Vann be the leading receiver? I don't know if we even know that. I mean, Juice Wells or somebody else might have lay their claim to that. But they do have some guys that have skill sets that I think is certainly fair to say have been underutilized. And I think a big part of that was just the offensive struggles in general. I think Jaheim Bell, was the second leading receiver last year with 30 catches. Not a huge number. We know Jaheim Bell is going to probably get the football a lot in this offense, whether it's carrying the ball straight out of the backfield, whether it's jet sweeps, whether it's playing the slot, matching up with guys. Do have more flexibility in their personnel. They are expected to take a step forward in quarterback play. And so that's going to increase opportunities for everybody. I think what we saw in the bowl game was, now keeping in mind that North Carolina, not a great defense, right? Especially the end of last year, they were struggling, but South Carolina did take advantage of it, and they took advantage of it better than they had all season, with some wrinkles, with some interesting and creative personnel packages. I think that's what it's all about for this team this year. Marion Brown, as you said, is a 4-3, sub 4-3 guy. He's a tough cover one-on-one. He's a guy that you get out into space in the flats. He's maybe difficult to run down. And so you see how they used him in the bowl game, some little swing passes, getting him in motion. That's the type of thing he can do. Is he going to catch 60 balls? Probably not. That might be a Juice Wells. That might be somebody else. But they do have more offensive weapons this season. And I think that, combined with quarterback play and other factors, that's probably why Gamecock fans are more excited about this offense. And that's why Phil Steele is projecting, more points for this offense this season.
Yeah, man. And I think just to accentuate a point you just made, it is hard. It's dangerous to just compare the stats for last year to this year when you're looking at individuals, because of that very point. If this goes as planned, if this goes as you're drawing it up, they're going to be on the field offensively a lot more than they were last year. There will be a lot more opportunities for these guys. I tend to think they want this offense, Chris, to be fairly balanced, but I also am going to talk out of both sides of my mouth and say, you don't get a Spencer Rattler and bring him in here to hand the football off. Like they've actually been somewhat quiet about exactly how they want to call this offense. I think it's the same. It seems to be the same offensive playbook. You're always adding and subtracting to an extent, but it's not a makeover, is what I'm trying to say. However, you can call it all these different ways as far as actual play calling. I don't think you bring in Spencer Rattler to hand the football off, no matter how good you feel about your running backs. So I think the ball is going to be moved around. I think all these guys are going to have opportunities. And dude, it's going to be about who can take advantage when the ball is in the air. That's ultimately going to decide how the ball sort of ends up being facilitated, I think. But it's a fun conversation. It's a fun conversation for the fans, because it sure beats, well, is there a number one? Which is the conversation, I think we were having last year. So, all this is an upgrade from that conversation. And I think you're starting to see the pieces come together all the way around. Austin Stogner, man, obviously he came in with a lot of hype, coming in with Spencer. It feels like it's been a little bit quiet about Stogner among the fan base right now.
100%.
It's not quiet about Stogner in that long ops building right now. Like, there's a lot of excitement. And I think I don't know. I think I just meet everybody like around the program, like fans, media. I don't know if he's gotten enough love for how good of a pass catcher he is. Like it's a different skill set than Jaheim, but they say this guy's like a dog. Like the ball is in the air, Stogner's ripping it down. So I think red zone wise, I think down the seam, when everybody's focused on everybody else, it seems like having a big tight end who can just run down the seam when the safeties are worried about everybody else can actually be a huge advantage. And it can't hurt that Spencer Rattler has more rapport with him than anybody else on the team, you would think.
Yeah, he has been kind of lost. Like, plenty of people have talked about Juice Wells. Plenty of people have talked about Corey Rucker. Obviously Spencer Rattler, like that's a different level than anybody. But he has gone under the radar for what he is. So let's recap what he is. He's a guy who has a lot of college experience. He's a former 4-star guy out of high school. He's 6'5", 250. As you said, he's already got a rapport on the field and a friendship with Spencer Rattler. And then just go look at go look up some clips of him playing in Oklahoma. He hasn't played as much ball for his age because he has had some injuries, but he's caught some passes. I mean, he's caught 47 balls in his career and 8 touchdowns. So you're bringing in a guy at a tight end position with size, experience, and rapport with your starting quarterback who has legitimate ball skills. He can run, he can catch the ball in the open field, and he can also catch the ball over smaller defenders. So it is just interesting with all and I think well-deserved, kind of hype, not in a negative way, that guys like Rucker and Wells have gotten. You remember the craze over Oscar Delp, like in the 2022 class, who's a great prospect, don't get me wrong. But it's I totally agree with you. It's kind of just gotten pushed to the side. Oh, Austin Stogner, cool. He's going to play a key role, I think, in this offense.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, man. I think the way this thing's probably going to be structured, there will probably be several guys that fans are maybe going, why didn't they get the ball to this guy this week? Why didn't they get the ball to this guy this week? And then you're kind of going to have to go back and be like, well, that's because the ball went to that guy. Well, you hope, and in theory, if you're a Gamecock fan, that's the answer. It's not, well, it's because the offense had 50 plays on the field. It's more like, well, this was Juice Wells' week where he just went off because that's the way it played out, There will be weeks, though, Stogner may not touch the ball. Then there may be weeks where he catches 7 passes for 2 touchdowns. Like, I think it's just going to, and there are going to be weeks probably where a guy on the team says, "Head coach, why, to himself, why am I not getting the football?" And it's, well, that's the way it played out that week. So I think that's going to be one of the most intriguing things about it, Chris, is just seeing how this whole thing actually plays out and comes together as far as ball distribution and the structure of this offense. Defensive side of the ball, Mo Kaba's name keeps coming back up. Quietly, I didn't know this, didn't remember this, didn't lock this in my brain until I saw the Garnet Trust tweet about him joining Garnet Trust Connect, which everybody go check that out, obviously, thegarnettrust.com. He was the defensive most improved player in the spring. Sometimes we all know that doesn't carry over completely. But the buzz is real on Mo Kaba right now. I see there's a world I can see where Mo Kaba ends up being the leading tackler on this team this year. Like, just comes out of nowhere and ends up being the guy at linebacker, I think. My antenna is up on Mo Kaba breakout season this year.
You moving in that direction?
Yes.
Game 1, is Mo Kaba definitely a starter? Or is this everybody in the building going, okay, Mo's probably our starter by game 3? You know what I mean? Like, kind of let it play out. Almost like the when you got the backup quarterback and it's kind of inevitable that it happens.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question. I don't know which direct. I think Mo's a starter at some point this year.
I see that. And Travis made a great point here on Mo. There's been a lot of fan expectations, questions about him over the years. Why hasn't he done it yet? And the knee injury took a while longer than is typical nowadays for ACLs. Had it in high school, it just hampered his development. But he looks great physically. He's always been a very talented kid. You're talking about a big, physically imposing, violent football player. And so, like, from a trait standpoint and how he looks, I would say Wes probably the most impressive guy from a physical trait standpoint in that room right now. And it's really started to show on the field as he's continued acclimating. He seems 100% healthy. That's a big, that would be big if he had not taken even this big of a leap. Just to have a healthy Mo Kaba who could come in. He took more snaps last year than I think I realized, but being able to have him come in and really push and really, really feel good about putting him in, it's gone from that, which would be positive development, to, okay, this kid may be a really good player for us on defense. I think that's kind of the direction the coaching staff and everybody around the program is now gone.
Yeah, so definitely circle that, follow that. Will be very, very interesting there. It's kind of funny, man. You there's always, you go in, you kind of think you think what's going to happen. There's just a guy or two that emerges, and it just plays out differently than you expect. I don't want to be the one to try to call this battle yet either, because I think it is kind of close. I don't want to speak for coaches, but doesn't it seem like, and I know it's a very small sample size, when we're out there, doesn't it seem like Boogie Huntley finds his way into the first group besides Zach Pickens?
I think we're gonna see in game one. It seems like there's going to be an all Hammond school side of that defensive line with Jordan Birch and Boogie Huntley out there. Well, Boogie and the thing was, man, on the first Welcome Home series, Boogie Huntley got a good bit of airtime during the spring game. They had him mic'd up.
That's one of my favorite scenes, actually, from it.
Yeah, it was great. He got shorted a sack. Probably still salty about it. Maybe he takes it out on Georgia State. We'll see.
That's the chip he's playing with right now.
He's got coach shorted me a sack. They need to remind him of that all year. But no, look, you remember, man, when he was coming out of high school, he's in the same class as Jordan Birch. And we would talk to Eric Kimry about the guys there. At the time, they had Birch and Huntley in 2020. CJ Stokes, Michigan signee in 2022, was a young one that was coming up. Remember seeing him for the first time. And we were consistently told, hey, everybody's talking about Birch. He's a 5-star. He's got this giant offer list. But Boogie Huntley has a chance to be a really, really good NFL level type player as well, as what Eric Kimry always thought. And, here we are. He's gotten his feet wet. He's gotten some playing time. That was kind of the question. We knew Zach Pickens would be a starter. But who's the other guy beside him? Is it an MJ Webb in his 6th year who had a good year last year? Is Tonka Hemingway out there? Who's the guy? And as it turns out, man, it really looks like Boogie has put his stamp on that. Other guys will play. They've got some depth at that position, but he's done a really, really good job for himself, it looks like.
Yeah, man, I remember that story. It was something about a young Boogie had mapped out the ideal size that these future professionals were when they were his age, and just the progression of size, strength, body type, stuff like that for guys that kind of fit what he does. And I was like, man, this kid's built a little different as far as how he thinks about things. And also, wasn't he a student body president or student body vice president at Hammond?
Yeah, Hammond, I think he was a student body president. Yep.
Yeah. So smart kid, built different all the way around. That's cool for Boogie. Boogie's always been, you're not supposed to have favorites, but Boogie's always just been an impressive dude.
For sure.
Every time you talk to him, very down to earth. So good for him, man. This and that's a good group. They felt good about that group all off season, I think. And Tonka Hemingway is still going to play a ton. MJ Webb, shoot, man, don't forget TJ Sanders, Nick Barrett behind him. Like there's some depth at that defensive tackle spot. So will be interesting. All right. Anything else on team you got, Chris, before we move ahead to recruiting?
Well, I did want to make one more point offensively. Before we moved into defense, I think you look at last year and going back to kind of the point about how you distribute the football. Last year, just being realistic, there were tons of problems. We don't need to relitigate it. If you want to go look at what we said, go look at all the GC lives after the game from last year, if you really want to do that to yourself. If a lot of people wanted to boil it down to one problem, there were so many problems, offensively in terms of why the performance wasn't consistent. But I do think if everybody on this football team would have been healthy, and even if you think the play calling last year could have been to X level, whatever your expectation was, it shouldn't have been super, super high. Just take play calling's really great. Everybody's healthy. That offense, in my opinion, still wouldn't have been super explosive because there were still personnel limitations. As it turned out, they had all that. Plus, they really just didn't get the scheme situated for most of the season. And then you had all the quarterback issues, right? Your starter goes down. You got Jason Brown. You got Zeb Nolan. There's just not a lot of consistency there. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with injuries, but you have a firm starter that you feel really good about, and you have more faces, and you have some guys on last year's team that had developed, Xavier Leggett, Amarian Brown. Certainly you feel better about them than last year. So last year, I think South Carolina's coaching staff probably putting together plans in the middle of the season, and they would get into the game, and it's very quickly, can't do that. Now, I think you have a little bit more of wiggle room.
We got sound effects now.
It's like a Jim Rome. I think people make fun of Jim Rome because he would start crumpling papers and throwing them and stuff.
I hope that wasn't important.
It was blank.
No.
Or it's probably some chicken scratch. I think I just went on that whole diatribe just so I could rip a piece of paper.
You had that planned the whole time?
It wasn't. It was. But my points still stand. I think everybody's hit on that. There is, though, I think more scheme flexibility this year, and even in game. You got to think about that. These coaches game plan. Well, guess what? The other side game plans too. And so when you get in to these games, you got to be able to adjust. And I think they'll have a little bit more capacity, at least, to adjust in games this season.
Well, you're gonna have more options if something's taken away from you as well. I think
Yeah.
Or if a guy goes down, if a guy gets hurt, you have options. So yeah, we'll see, man. Before we get to recruiting, I want to tell y'all here briefly, if I can find my graphic. There's a lot going on over here. Chris has put me off my game with pulling his sound effects out of the hat. Liberty Tax, our friends right here in the Columbia area. Give them a call, 803-462-5576. My friend Larry over there has graciously supported GC Live here, and I want you to support him as well. They got several locations around Columbia. There's a new one at 551 St. Andrews Road. That's by the Harbor Freight. There's an Lexington office by Dunkin' Donuts. That's at 1123 South Lake Drive, and in Irmo by Kroger at 7467 St. Andrews Road. Obviously, tax deadline for this year is past, but there's still plenty the tax team at Liberty Tax can help you with. You own a small business, you need advice, bookkeeping, payroll services, LLCs, S Corps, C Corps, or if you unfortunately owe money to the IRS, give them a shout. They'll help you through a very, very daunting process. Again, 803-462-5576. Shout out Larry. Appreciate you, man. Again, all we ask, we encourage you, just give the people that support us a chance. And Larry, I promise, will take care of you over there at Liberty Tax. Chris, recruiting run has been impressive. The latest from Xavion Hardy, 4-star defensive lineman from Georgia, commits to South Carolina. I would say not necessarily a surprise that they got him. I think it had started to trend back in their direction, but it did kind of pop up a little bit out of nowhere just in the timing of it being yesterday. But Gamecocks are happy regardless of when the commit came. What are your thoughts on, let's go big picture, because that'll give me time to pull his highlights up. We'll talk about the player in a second. Big picture, what does it mean for Carolina to add another talented, what I would call a disruptor up front?
Well, a lot of the conversation is centered around the offensive line class that South Carolina's put together, with fans even asking, okay, where on paper does this rank to any class kind of in the recruiting rankings online history? I got the first question today, Wes, or we got the first couple questions about how about the D-line class? Where is it starting to rank? It's not there quite yet with some of the other ones, but certainly big picture, zooming out, you add Xavion Hardy, all of a sudden you're now at a trio of 4-star defensive linemen. Your top 3 commitments are all trench guys. Hashtag trenches, right? Saw that going around social media. Marquis Anderson is the highest ranked guy right now, offensive line. Number 2 is now Xavion Hardy. And then number 3 is Xavier McLeod. Of course, aside from McLeod and Hardy, they also have a commitment from Montague Rames, the in-state edge prospect. So I think here you have 3 prospects that are pretty different. Montague Rames is definitely an edge. Xavier McLeod, definitely a defensive tackle. Hardy, for me, is an inside guy as well, but he's different than McLeod. Different body composition, different skill set. You look at him, he's 6'5", 250, 260 rather. I think South Carolina did a really good job here. It's just a great example of how they've built towards this 2023 class. This is where we're seeing some of those long-standing relationships that Shane Beamer and his staff had to start building once he arrived in December 2020. Hardy was offered in March of 21, and now they've carried that recruitment through some bumps and some ups and downs all the way to where they have now a verbal commitment from him.
Sorry, y'all. I know I'm muted, but if you're on the other screen, you cannot unmute yourself. So that was the brief pause. There you see it right there. Here are his highlights. This guy, Chris, he's one of the originals. I feel like we started hearing, and that's because just talent-wise, I mean, upside through the roof. And I'm with you, man. I think he's kind of like a true like 3 technique type guy that can be athletic but play inside and can just give guards fits. And man, I think they obviously have like kind of, I don't want to say they're in perfect position, but when you just sort of look, you got an older guy in Zach Pickens starting. You got an older guy in MJ Webb right now with the second team, along with sort of a third-year player in Tonka coming along beside him. You got a couple of young guys behind them at defensive tackle. Now you kind of put yourself in a position, I think reload is a little bit too strong at this point, but you're stacking them the way you want to. This is the way you stack them to where you're not sitting there 3 years from now going, oh man, we're losing 2 starters and a reserve and there's nobody in place to come in and play. Like I think this is an ideal stacking of class situations. If you look at the interior of the defensive line, it's the spot you want to soon be at edge, because that's not the spot they're in right now at edge.
Right. They are in a good mix of, like, you look at defensive tackle, it is probably one of the deeper rooms in the team. That said, if we go back to kind of on-field impact, there's a lot of improvement left to do there, right? I mean, stopping the run was something that was talked about a lot last season, but they do have talent there. The guys you mentioned, Boogie Huntley, you have the youngsters there with TJ Sanders and Nick Barrett. Sanders has drawn a lot of great reviews, and Nick Barrett's a very impressive kid who's very strong in his lower body, and I think those two are going to have a chance to be the 2 guys of the future. This allows you an opportunity to bring in a McLeod, a Hardy, bring them along, develop them, and then they turn into the guys. Then you start thinking, Wes, about the opportunity in this class to bring in another priority guy, Elijah Davis from junior college, a guy that's going to have some seasoning and experience if South Carolina can get him. Doesn't have an on-3 consensus ranking, but On3 likes him a lot. They have him as a 4-star, as the number 3 JUCO prospect overall in the country, and the number 1 JUCO defensive lineman in the country. You add him, now you've got McLeod, Hardy, and Davis at defensive tackle. And there's work to be done on the edge, as you said, but you feel good about that class if you can get them all enrolled, all in place, and all developed.
Definitely, man. I continue to feel pretty good about where they're at with Elijah Davis. I know the competition is pretty stout there, but Jimmy Lindsey, Jody Wright, his connections in Mississippi with him being, with Elijah being at East Mississippi, and then of course being from the state of South Carolina. You got some things working in your favor there, I think, with him. So really a chance for an outstanding defensive line class as far as the interior guys. And then all of a sudden, you have South Carolina sitting there. We're exactly a week from the Desmond Umeozulu announcement. There's chatter about the Gamecocks coming on strong here. They've tried to make a really strong push. Ohio State had been kind of the industry consensus pick, I feel like, for a while. Then I don't even know the details, y'all. You have the rumblings about, did the visit not go well? Did a visit not go well at Ohio State? I don't know. Then you have some losers calling Desmond out on a YouTube stream or something I saw. And I don't know what happened with all that, y'all. But
some losers.
I mean, a grown men calling out a high school kid.
That's awesome.
It was not a good look for those guys. But Chris, all of a sudden, it just kind of feels like South Carolina is really, really strong in this thing. He took an official visit back in June, had good response on that, and this would be an excellent addition for them if they could pull it off to pair him, with Montague Rames, and then of course Nick Harbor out there as well. We'll see what position he ends up playing, but Sterling Lucas, man, putting him in position, I feel like.
I think we'll get to Harbor in a second. I want to reserve that for that'd be a level up, like a video game reference. Desmond U, if they could get him, now you've got 2 4-star ends in the class, and that would give you 5 4-star defensive tackles overall, or not defensive tackles, 5 4-star guys up front, right? I mean, you'd have McLeod, you've had Hardy, you'd have Rames, Desmond U, and if you could get Elijah Davis, that would give you 5. 3 defensive tackles, 2 edge guys. That would be a heck of a class on paper. And not when not just staring at a ranking, kind of talking to some people about the guys, watching their film. That would be a class that would have a chance to develop into a pretty formidable front. You go Nick Harbor. Now you're talking about you'd have 6 guys on the defensive front. Now Harbor he could play edge. Maybe he's tight end. Maybe he's who the heck. I mean, you put him wherever.
You can do anything.
Okay. Yeah, he'd do anything. That would take it really next level. But I mean, Desmond U, this kid, South Carolina, that you just posted for those that are watching on the beginning of his huddle, he has his first 10 graphic. South Carolina, actually, we've talked about a bunch of guys that they got in extremely early with. This is a guy where it came on a little bit later, and you shouted out Sterling Lucas. Lucas has done a great job building trust with Desmond U to where now South Carolina looks like they're in the top 2 at worst with him going into next week's announcement.
Yeah, they've pushed really, really hard here lately, and it seems like there's traction. We'll see if they can pull it off. I don't think you can project it that it's going to be South Carolina yet, but I think momentum is maybe the way I would explain it. I think there is momentum here quite easy. I feel like I can feel comfortable saying that is what I'm trying to say. So we'll see, man. I think that would be exactly what you're looking for. And then Harbor, as we get in and talk about him a little bit, everybody wants to talk about Nick Harbor right now, and I get it, because this guy is a unicorn. Like, he is amazing on and off the field, super smart kid, can do it all, track, stand out, maybe might be an Olympic athlete on track. I'll say this. It's probably I get this question asked all the time, Chris, and I love the the interest in it. But well, where are we at with Harbor? Where are we at with Harbor? Can we get Harbor? From South Carolina fans. I think it's just way, way, way too early to say anything like that, because this is not a kid who's been one of the ones that has identified with the idea of, I'm going to go ahead and finish the process right now. So much can happen between now and December. So I think it's just really hard to say. Can we say South Carolina is in it? I think we can very safely say that. Have they, I believe, risen up that list? I think we can say that as well. But even down to, Zach here on YouTube says Harbor wants to play tight end because the weight for track. And that is a true, I've seen that quote as a true statement. Does that mean a couple of years from now, regardless of what team he's suiting up for, that he's 100% going to be a full-time tight end? I don't think we can say that either. Like, I think this kid's going to get on a campus and everybody's going to work together, including with his own input, decide the best spot for him, So I think right now, if you're South Carolina, this is what they're doing. It's about being open to him playing whatever. I mean, snap the ball to him if you have to. Like, just, he can do it all, but I don't think we can accurately predict where he's going to be playing ball at, or even what position he's playing at this point.
Yeah, and that's why we listed him as, we threw him in that edge category, because he's very capable of doing that. With his physical profile, if he continued developing as a football player, this is a guy that's like number 1 overall NFL draft pick as an edge rusher type talent, because he's 6'5", 230, and can run. What did he run in the 200? I'm more even impressed by the 200 than the 100. I mean, the 200 time was absolutely ridiculous. I think it was the 4th fastest time in the U.S. by a high school sprinter ever at that size. Not like the stat is in general. I'm saying he did it at his size. So the physical profile is amazing. Does he want to play tight end because of track? Yes, right. That has been said. But that's one of the things you got to figure out. I mean, the first thing came out. I mean, Chris Culliver wanted to be a wide receiver and was a wide receiver. And he was a wide receiver when he got to South Carolina for a while, until he wasn't. Then he was a DB. He ended up going and playing in the league as a DB. So I think that the general point is you figure that out. You work with everybody and figure that out. South Carolina and most other schools, I would imagine, do not care what he's saying about where he wants to play, or even what you get him and you figure it out. Where South Carolina is they, to overuse the phrase, the whole seat at the table thing, they're there. They're invited to the party. He's going to be in town for an official visit this season, which has been the expectation for Nick Harbor. That was kind of the missing piece for South Carolina. They got him on campus for a really good unofficial last summer. They got him on campus for a really good unofficial this summer. Hasn't seen a game yet. So can they get him on in Williams-Brice for a game, have him see that atmosphere? The answer looks like yes. And for a guy that has, I think, a top 7, Wes, scoring one of those 5 official visits is a key. I mean, that doesn't mean South Carolina is leading or that they're definitely going to get him, but they are heavily, heavily in the mix, and that's about as a good a spot as you can be in right now.
Yeah, and if you're watching, this is him flying off the edge on this video right now, if you're on the YouTube version of the show. But we had a couple more questions, Zach, about how we would see the next wide back like Bell or Debo. See, I don't think so. I mean, you're talking about, he's so tall, he's so long is the thing. Especially and I know the track comment was more about his size, but and not wanting to get over a certain weight, I would think, if he's going to excel at track. But also, I don't think this is the guy you necessarily are going to give the ball like Jaheim or Debo on jet sweeps or hand it off out of the backfield. At 6'5", 6'6", you don't want him taking the beating on his knees for that either. Almost, man, depending on what size he ends up playing at, this dude could be a wide receiver. Like, he could be Calvin Johnson. Like, you could just, see him right here. He's outside. If that's a huge part of the equation, and this kid's going to really pursue being an Olympic athlete on track, which he very well could. I think if he's on offense, that becomes a possibility of just, hey, let's put him out there as wide as possible. And who are you going to cover? What cornerback are you rolling out there to cover this guy?
Good luck.
I mean, am I crazy, Chris?
No, not at all. I mean, when you look at him on film, I mean, he looks like a long-limbed, wide receiver, like you said. I can see that. There are a lot of different. I do think he is. Jaheim and Debo are a lot closer together in terms of player than Nick Harbor is to either one of them. And I think Jaheim and Debo are still a good bit different, in terms of their skill set. But Harbor, you used a good word. I mean, he is a unicorn. It's almost his athletic profile and ability almost makes it even difficult to figure out what to do with him, because a lot of guys like, this is what he is. Well, with him, you don't know. You're almost scared to make the wrong decision.
Yeah.
If he's playing tight end, goodness, are you underutilizing him? Probably. At least if he's on the edge, he's there every play. Tight end, are you asking a guy that's that big that can run, you would assume 4.3s, 4.4 at absolute worst? You're asking him to go block somebody half the time? I mean, I don't know. So it will almost be a challenge, I think, at the college level to figure out how to best utilize him. I think he'll do anything you ask him to quite well, but just trying to figure that out. Back to the recruiting angle real quick, Wes, throw this in. LSU, I think, is the current leader on the On3 RPM, which is the recruiting prediction machine. It utilizes both what humans think, people that cover recruiting predictions, and machine learning based on a lot of different metrics to predict. Obviously, too early to sit here and all of us go start posting on message boards that LSU is going to get Harbor, but they're in the mix. Michigan is one that I have my antenna up on, Wes. His comments about Michigan to Chad Simmons the other day were very interesting. He is a high academic kid. I think his mother's a pharmacist. His father works for NASA. So academics are obviously very important there as well. Michigan has pretty strong reputation there. So those are a few other, not all the schools to watch, but those are a few others to watch as well.
Yeah, Travis making a great point. Says if he plays tight end, I hope he turns into Kyle Pitts. That's probably a pretty good, just stylistically, skill set wise, pretty good idea of how you would use him. I mean, Kyle Pitts was a tight end, but I mean, Dan Mullen was moving this guy all over the place, and he was lining up not just in the slot, but far outside as like a true wide receiver a lot as well. So that would be probably, I think, maybe an ideal, or at least a good snapshot of what you would want to do with him. But I agree with you, Chris, man. It's like a great problem to have, but it's kind of scary if you're the coach with this kid's future in your hands, trying to figure that out. It's like, it's not like wide receiver and defensive end are similar, where she's like, well, it's not working out. Let's just move him back over. Okay, we just wasted a year with him getting used to playing defensive end. It's like that.
Yep.
It's kind of like when Major League Baseball, I look at it like Major League Baseball teams, like franchises, when they have a great pitcher / hitter. How do you decide which side to make this guy go all in on? And he could excel maybe at both of them, but what's the best thing for this kid? What's the best thing for your program? What's the best thing for everybody involved? It's kind of, again, it is a little bit scary, actually.
Yeah, it is. It's not really feasible. A lot of people still talk about, I'm going to play 2 sports in college. And some do it. Some do it. Not as many as talk about doing it, because it becomes, once you get there, it's like, okay, yeah, this is going to be difficult. Or even if you could feasibly do it, let's say there's a high school kid who skips spring practice for football to stay baseball full time. You don't think you're going to get behind in football? Some of the others that are out there all the time, you are. And so even zooming into the one sport, in theory, you could just say, oh, well, just let him play both sides of the ball. It's not that easy, for a lot of different reasons. So it will be fascinating to see where this guy ends up, number one, just in terms of his recruitment. Certainly, with how this has gone, Wes, we'll be continuing to track that because South Carolina is heavily in it. And then number two, where he ends up in terms of his position. So if South Carolina can land him, Wes, we may be devoting a full GC Live hour to where Nick Harbor is going to play at the next level. If so, that'll be, I think, a good problem for the Gamecock fans to have.
Yes, it will be, man. And this is one of those kids, man, that people want to talk about. They want to hear about it with good reason. Great player. Travis said I was showing film with Javon Curse and say you could be him and a lock for the number one pick in the NFL draft, or be Pitts, who went fourth. So, both of them are pretty doing pretty well, I guess. But, yeah, good stuff. That would be a fun show, actually. We could have Travis send us the clips of the guys he reminds him of.
Well, luckily, good recruiting pitch, Travis. I guess fortunately for South Carolina, Florida's not heavily in it, or that would be that'd be a really good pitch for them. So
yeah,
maybe keep that to yourself, Travis.
Make it Clowney and Hayden Hurst or something, I guess.
There you go, something like that. That's right.
Clowney and Jared Cook. But anyway, I think that's all I got, man. We could probably sit here, like you said, and on and on and on, but then the people would probably eventually cut it off. And two, I'm kind of tired of talking. So should we do this again soon?
Let's do it again soon.
All right. He is Chris. I'm Wes. Hey, the numbers were great today. I can tell season is almost here. Y'all are like dialed in, which is awesome. Appreciate all the interaction today. Again, Craig, Gamecock, Ryan, great to meet y'all on Saturday, man. Travis, appreciate you hopping in. Greg McClellan, appreciate you. Still Curtin. I missed some people. Jamie Henson, Zach. Let's see. Who else? Aaron Gibson, Ricardo Pinckney. Shout out to everybody for joining, for interacting. We'll be back very soon. Appreciate our sponsors. Y'all have a great one.